Welcome. My name is Tessa. I'm an agency and community engineer at Pantheon. My job at Pantheon is to ensure that developers and anyone using our platform is successful, whether that be through trainings, whether that be through community outreach, a variety of different things. And so mentorship is something that is really important to me and definitely plays into my role as well as my passions in life. I have also been an instructor for Girl Development Minneapolis for a number of years, and that's really how I got started into mentorship, which we'll dig into. Also the founder of Outspoken Women, which is an initiative to help get more technical women speakers out in open source. All right, and so if you'd like to reach out to me, my username is TessaK22 out on the socials. My email is right there, as well as my website, and they've kind of been sharing it around, but I wanted to reiterate, if you have any positive comments about WPCampus, other talks that you've done, or this talk, we would love to see them on social media. Use the hashtag WPCampus. So before we dig in, I want to talk about my story for just a couple of minutes and why mentorship is so important to me. So when I'm from a small town in northern Minnesota. We eventually ended up moving to the Twin Cities. And when we moved to the Twin Cities, I had found out about this organization called Girl Develop It. They were very new. They were looking for TAs to help TA a class. So teacher assistants, so basically help answer questions while the teacher is speaking and all that great stuff. And after the class, one of the chapter leaders was like, "You were super helpful. Can you please teach a class for us?" And so I decided, why not? I love doing this stuff. I'm really into it. I would love to teach a class. So I taught a class, loved it. It was probably the best thing that I've ever done in terms of tech, and it was awesome. So it kind of became my passion to really help mentor these new developers. I am a completely self-taught developer, so I've been through the pain points of trying to figure out how to do something. At that time, it was like 10 years ago, Stack Overflow was not really what it is today. Sure, there were ways to Google things, but it just wasn't the same. So the fact that I could help and actually contribute to someone's education and teach them how to become a developer was exciting to me. So as we dig into these slides, there's going to be a variety of information about mentorship in terms of how you can get involved and tips that you can look into. But the things I really want to talk about first is like why it's so important. So job outlook. In terms of web developers, in 2016, there was 162,000 job openings. So that didn't mean that like necessarily openings, but those were all of the jobs that were filled and open as well with web developers. In 2026, there is expected to be 188,000 jobs, which doesn't seem like a huge difference, but it's actually very high compared to other industries. So there's a huge need for bringing in these new developers to help fill all of these new roles that are going to be open. And then over that 10 years, there's about 10% of developers that are going to be retiring. There's actually a lot of research behind web developers and early retirement ages, and whether that be that they just get sick of having to learn new stuff, like we all do sometimes, or if it's just one of those industries where they just decide that they're moving on and doing something else. But with this rate of retirement and with the rate of the increase, it's really important that we spend time on mentoring new developers and bringing them into the industry. So I took some time. I looked at a lot of junior web developer roles, so current openings that junior web developers could apply to. And 60% of them required 2+ years of experience. That was mind-blowing to me. If we're trying to hire junior developers and we want to get them in the door, we want to give them the experience that they need to be successful developers on the teams that we need them to be, like, how can we expect them to get this 2 years of experience if the roles that they are trying to apply for are supposed to be entry level? So it's frustrating, and I would love to see those numbers change, and that's a huge passion of mine. So 16% have required 1 year of experience, and only 23% of them required no experience at all. I think 23% is way too low. It's obviously better than 16%, but I think that those junior web developer roles, there should be a huge amount of them that have really no experience required to get involved. So how in the world are they getting this experience? How are these positions that need 2+ years of experience, how are they getting that 2+ years? Where are they getting that information from, and how are they being able to obtain that to actually feel comfortable to apply for these jobs? So let's be the change that we wish to see in the world. If this is something that we want to change, we can do that. We can make that change. We can decide that we are going to mentor more developers. So for organizations, let's talk about why you should hire junior developers. So junior developers bring in a variety of benefits, obviously, but the first one being team morale. Have you ever worked with a new developer and they are just like jacked? They're full of energy and they want to learn everything you can possibly tell them. And they're excited, even if you give them like the worst job that's like data entry or something super boring, they don't care. They're still excited. And mentoring is rewarding because that excitement rubs off on you. It feels good that you are all helping contribute to training this new developer and giving them the skills that they need to become successful people in their careers. Finding good people is hard. So anyone who's a manager or who's responsible for interviewing and hiring, you know that finding the right person for your role, and especially the right person that has the personality and the culture fit that you're looking for, as well as the right skills, is really hard to find. So instead of working on having to get both of those avenues, let's just hire the right people and give them the skills. So in hiring junior developers or new developers, you can do that. Find someone with a passion to learn, who has the skills and then, or who has the personality, and give them those skills. Passion is infectious. Again, this is very similar to the team morale. If that new or junior developer comes onto your team, they're going to be excited, they're passionate, they have a drive to succeed, and it's going to naturally ignite the rest of your team to want to take part and just get excited about anything that your team might be working on as a whole. They're going to bring in new ideas and thinking. So with new team members in general, whether they be junior developers or whether they're experienced developers, they're going to bring new ideas and thinking. They're going to look at things in a much different way than your current team members are looking at things. And especially being new developers, they are not really in the industry yet. They're pretty new. They're not really sure how things maybe work. They're going to have a different way of looking at things that can be very optimistic when you're trying to work on new projects. So with that being said, how do we get started? As a company, if you're looking to bring in junior developers, you decide that this is something that you want to take on, what are some things that you can do? The first thing that I want to put a lot of kind of level of importance on is writing better job descriptions. If you're willing to hire new developers, don't require them to have years of experience. Instead, focus on personality traits. So like desire to learn, passionate about their work, excited to dig in, just whatever personality traits are going to prove to you and your company that this developer is willing to learn, whatever it is that they need to learn, and are going to be successful at being a member of your team. Create strategic partnerships. So make sure that you're partnering experienced developers with new developers that share similar goals, similar coding interests, maybe even they have similar hobbies or personality traits. If you are trying to build a relationship with a mentor and a mentee, it's important that they can actually have a very somewhat personal conversation. It's a relationship that requires a lot of attention and care. And so the better that those two people can get along, the better that their actual processes will go. Don't require involvement. I think this one's super important to touch on. If you decide that you want to bring in maybe more than one junior developer, maybe you've decided that you'd like to create a mentorship program with your team and bring on 3 to 4 or 2 to 3 developers, make sure that there is a way for people to opt out. Some people don't enjoy teaching others, and just be aware of your current team's interests before making any decisions about requiring involvement. Managers are not mentors, and this one's also super important. Mentees need to have an open relationship with someone that they can confide in. So just like creating those strategic partnerships, it's important that they still have that personal relationship and they can be able to have those conversations. Your developers are not going to be able to confide in you the same way that they would with someone who they are working with and someone who they can relate to. Open lines of communication. Ensure that there are methods in which they can openly communicate with you and their mentor. This really can be a variety of different things depending on your industry and your company and what you're doing. This could be a Slack team that everyone shares. This could be weekly check-ins. Maybe you've got a weekly conversation that everyone checks in and talks about it. Maybe it's a comment box. Whatever you need to use so that your campus or your team or your company is successful with communication. Track progress and make goals. So I think this is really important to make a habit of having regular check-ins. Don't just create these partnerships and hope that they're going to succeed without doing any follow-up. Obviously, it's important that those two or your kind of partnerships create a relationship and that they're communicating constantly, really, but don't expect for that to happen and not have any follow-up. And I think probably the last really good point is build a program. If you are deciding that you want to do this, turn this into a repetitive program. Your newly mentored developers that have gone through this mentorship program with an experienced developer, they're going to be super excited to share the knowledge of the skills that they've learned. So turn them into mentors and have them start to mentor new developers. All right. So in terms of actual developers, so let's say that your company decides that they want to get involved in mentorship, or let's say maybe you, on the opposite side, you work for a company who doesn't want to get involved in mentorship. And this is something that you've personally decided that you want to take a leap and go out and do these things. What are some things that you can do and how can you get started as a developer to mentor junior developers? So do something great. How can you get started or why you should get started as a mentor? So I think there's a lot of reasons as to why I really enjoyed mentorship. And there's a lot of things that I can definitely relate to when it comes to that. I would say probably one of the top things that I've really appreciated, besides the fact that it's very rewarding, is that it really grows your network. I've had the opportunity to meet a lot of really experienced developers, a lot of awesome companies, a lot of organizations, nonprofits, just an array of people in my area just because I started digging into mentorship. So you'll meet a variety of other developers and companies as you start to search for developers that you'd like to mentor. It feels good. There's no lying, like it feels amazing to be a mentor and to help someone, especially when you are trying to teach them something and they have like that aha moment where they just get like super excited because whatever coding problem they were working on or whatever they were trying to figure out, they finally figured it out. And you can just like see the excitement in your eyes. And it feels super good to be a part of that. These feelings I like to call selfish acts of selflessness. Kind of a tongue twister, but they apply to a lot of things. So I do a lot of other volunteer work with like dog rescues and other places like that. And all of these things, even though we're giving back and we're volunteering and we're helping someone else, they're still very selfish acts because they feel so good. And so that feeling that we get is something we want to keep feeling. And even though we're doing those selfless things, it's a selfish feeling, but yet a very good one. Step outside of your comfort zone. So for me, I'm a very extroverted person. So I really enjoy getting to meet new people. I like going out and initiating conversations. For some developers, that might not be the case. So when you decide that you want to step out and become a mentor, you might be stepping outside of your comfort zone, whether that be you're leaving your company and you're going to go to a meetup or a local event, or whether that be you're just leaving your house and that's even hard for you. You're going to be stepping outside of your comfort zone, but you're going to enjoy it. You'll likely begin to attend more local tech events. You'll meet people that are very similar to you, but you'll also meet a lot of great people in general. And of course, there's usually beer at the tech events. Wait, people leave their house? I don't see why. I mean, it's great at our house. Do more. So master your own skills. I think for me, this was like something that was really also pretty great. So the first class that I taught was actually like an intermediate level HTML and CSS. So it was pretty basic in terms of the things that I was comfortable doing. But even in just digging through some of the CSS foundations and making sure I had all the correct terms for things, I actually learned a couple things of CSS that I didn't even realize. Like when I was teaching the class, they had just recently like released over like 150 different colors that you can use in CSS. When previous to that, it was like the 16 or whatever that is. It's just all of the details that you might not know. When you start to mentor someone, you will actually begin to learn the things that you already know just a little bit deeper because you're teaching them. And I think that that's a really important underlying piece of it, because you just get better at being who you are and what you do. Their successes feel like your successes. This one, also super great. Again, another little selfish act of selflessness. When your mentee meets their goals or they land their first job, that success can really hit home for you, especially if you have a very strong relationship with them and have done a lot to help get them there. I have one person that I have helped tremendously, or at least I feel like I have, and she says that I have, so hopefully that's true. Who has done a complete career change. She's decided to get into web development. She has now opened up her own company. She's building websites. It's still part-time, but she's gotten to that point of comfort where she can take on client work and actually build out those websites. And like, that's exactly how I felt in that picture. Like, throw confetti in the air, like her success feels like mine, and it's really exciting. And not only that, like, this person has become a lifelong friend for me. We chat on social media, we, send emails, we text back and forth. She's become a really close friend of mine. And your mentee will do the same thing. They will appreciate everything that you've done for them, and which means that you've just made yourself a new lifelong friend forever. So if you've decided you're going to step forward, you're going to become a mentor, where do you find these people? How do you go about finding developers who need mentors? Colleges or schools. Obviously, WPCampus is very higher education focused. This is a great place to find people. We've got students who are learning web development. We may have people who are looking to change careers or deciding to dig into something new because maybe their job is starting to say, hey, you could start to write some code for this if you were interested. Colleges and schools are a huge place to find people who are looking for mentors. I would say the one that's probably been the best place for me to actually find mentors have been code schools and boot camps. We have a local code school here in Minneapolis. I'm from Minnesota. And they have a mentorship program that they do each cohort that they have of students. Their programs, I think, are either 12 to 16 weeks. Every time they start a new cohort, they do a shout out and say, who wants to be a mentor? And you can either opt in or opt out. And it's really nice because if I have a busy time of year, I can opt out. But if I'm able if I have the bandwidth, I can say, yeah, I'm going to opt in. And then spend time actually mentoring those developers. Code schools are great places. They're excited to learn, and they're in a much shorter program, so they really need someone's help to be successful when they get out of that program. Local organizations and groups. You heard my story. This is actually how I got started. I happened to be on meetup.com. I found Girl Develop It, decided I was going to TA for the first class, and kind of the rest is history. But there are lots of other great tech groups, as well as nationwide organizations. Girl Develop It was one that was really great for me. Yes, We Code, Women Who Code. I know that there is tons of other organizations out there. And then definitely check out Meetup. Like, Meetup is going to have a lot of really smaller niche groups. We actually have a group that started here in Minneapolis. It was super small. It started on Eventbrite. It was just Minneapolis junior devs. And it's actually grown to be a really great, successful group. So definitely reach out and try to find some of those little kind of hidden gems in your area. Hackathons. Hackathons can be so fun. I actually just did a hackathon here this past year in April. 24-hour hackathon. We stayed there all night. We really got to know each other, especially once we all got really tired. But volunteering at a hackathon, or even putting together a team so that you can build a site or build whatever it is that you're building, is also a really great way. You're all going to have dinner together at some point. There's going to be some communications. You're going to meet other teams. There's a lot of opportunity to meet a lot of either new experienced developers or meet a lot of like junior developers who are looking for that mentor relationship. Conferences. I think if you are a introverted person, this one's probably going to be the most difficult to try to find mentees at. But for me, it's very easy. Again, very extroverted. I love just talking to random people. Sometimes there are conferences that will have a table or a kind of area set up that will allow you to build these relationships a lot easier. Maybe there's groups that are already organizations that are there, or maybe just a way to go and talk to them. Otherwise, go out there, have those conversations, and figure out kind of where some of these people are, and be able to meet a few people at conferences. All right, so we've learned about why you should be a mentor. We've learned about where you can find them. So let's talk about tips for being a good mentor. What are things that are going to make that relationship successful? And what are some things that are going to make your mentees learn a little bit easier and make that relationship more natural? I would say probably the thing that I do most. Yeah, I think I would say this is probably the top thing that I feel like is most important to being a mentor, is boosting their confidence. I myself get imposter syndrome all the time. New developers feel that imposter syndrome much more than us experienced developers do. So it's very important that we boost their confidence, whether that be conversations about, I can't do this, or I'm not even sure how to approach this problem. Give them the skills so that they can feel confident about the decisions that they make. And maybe that's just a emotional conversation about, I know you can do this, like you have this, you've gotten this far, you've proved to do this before. Just do whatever you can to boost their confidence so that they know that this is something that they're capable of doing. Help guide their career path. Definitely don't say you should do this or you should not do this, but talk them through the different things that they're thinking about. Are they thinking about front end versus back end? Are they thinking about different languages versus another language? Provide them the information so that they can make educated decisions and help kind of guide their path. Be available. This one's probably the hardest for me. I personally like to help out and be involved with everything I possibly can, but there's only so much time in the day. So just make sure that whatever it is that you're taking on, that you know that you can give it the attention that it needs. So be available to them when they need you. Schedule either regular in-person meetings or live online coding sessions. Set up some expectations about what your availability is, and stick to them and be available when they need you. Share resources with them. You might be browsing Twitter or LinkedIn or whatever it might be, and you might see an article that looks very natural to you, like, oh yeah, that's something I need to learn, or maybe that's something I already learned because I know it's important to learn. They may overlook those things because you don't know what you don't know. So make sure that you're sharing these things with them so that they can figure out the things that they also need to be learning. And similar to sharing resources, also share book recommendations. I don't normally spend a lot of money on my mentees, but every once in a while for Christmas, I get really excited and want to share something with them. And this is a really great Christmas gift, or kind of a nice thing to do, to just give them a book. There's a lot of companies that actually will give out books, as well as just recommend books that you know of that are really good to help them. I know a lot of times people aren't really book people, but I know for me, if I can visually see something in front of my face, like on my desk, and then be able to write, code or do whatever on a separate area, it helps me actually learn a little bit better. So I really strongly believe that books are a good way to learn. Working coding examples. I think this one is super important. I feel like a lot of developers learn by doing. At least that's definitely my preferred way of doing it. So give them coding examples that are ideally heavily commented, so they can start to dig through these different coding examples and figure out how something is working, and how they can tweak that or start to use that in their own project that they might be working on. Just a little background information about myself. I actually learned how to do HTML and CSS by just doing a view source. When I first got started, there wasn't awesome developer tools like there are now. And so by doing a view source, I was able to kind of look at the HTML and the CSS and some JavaScript and figure out what was happening and start to manipulate that to build out things that I wanted to do. Live coding sessions, also super great. So working on a project will help them think through why one method should be chosen versus the other. I think as developers, that's something that we do all the time. We approach a project, we try to figure out like, what should we do? Should we go this path or should we go this path? Should we use a plugin or should we build it out ourselves? And going through these live coding sessions can give your mentee a lot of these skills. Give them the information, help them decide which path that they should go, or just write some code together. Them kind of watching you write code can also allow them to learn why it is you're doing something, why the syntax is the way it is, and then allow them to write code so that you can help them feel like they're contributing, and really make them actually feel like a developer. Code reviews, obviously this one's super important. If your mentee is willing to give you a project that they recently worked on, or just write some code for you to be able to review that, review some of those code like you would with a normal project, but just make sure that you never tell them that they did something wrong. I think it's important that we give them feedback, but I think that no matter what it is that they're doing, they got it to work. So a part of it is a little bit right. But at least give them the feedback to say, hey, I realized you got this working, awesome job, you troubleshooted through this problem. But if you look at it like this, or use this, this way to write something or this way to do it, it's actually a little bit more compliant, or the syntax is better, or whatever it might be, so that they know that like they've still succeeded, they've wrote this code, they did what they wanted to do, but here's how we can make it better. And if you are really up to the challenge, lead a study group. We actually have someone here in Minneapolis. Her name is Tamara. She is absolutely amazing. If you're ever in Minneapolis, you'll know who she is, or you'll figure who she is out. She leads a study group every single Tuesday. So at this place, they do like coffee and like this kind of crazy style toast, actually. She leads a study group. And so every single Tuesday, whoever wants to come can come. And she answers questions, but there's also a lot of other awesome people who come and answer questions, as well as people who have no idea what they're doing and just come with a whole bunch of questions. So leading this study group is a really great way to get other people involved. And the nice thing about that too is that there will be other junior developers who will meet other junior developers that might not know each other. And it's really important for them to have other people that they can meet, that they can relate to, and be able to work together. So leading a study group is definitely a super awesome way to give back and get involved. All right, so I think I ended like right at where I wanted to, because I wanted to leave a lot of time for questions, which will give us about 15 minutes for Q&A. But I just wanted to shout out, if anyone is interested in getting started with mentoring, whether that be you're a campus and you want to start, training junior developers and you want to figure out some ways to get started, or whether like you're a developer and you just want to start mentor people and you're not sure how to get started, I'd love to help all of you. It's something that I love doing. My email is on there, as well as my website. My social media handle is on there as well. If you're looking for these slides, they are on my website, as well as have been blasted out to all my social media accounts. And just a little shout out, I wanted to do a shout out for some upcoming speaking events I have going on. If you're in the WordPress space, obviously, you're here at WPCampus. There's a couple of really good conferences coming up, LoopConf being one of them, and WordCamp Miami being another. So that is all I have for presentation. If anyone has questions, I'd love to answer them. All right, so we've got one question in here. Any advice for how to handle the student becoming the teacher? I've mentored through GSOC a few times, and they have had students who only know the basics when they start, but surpass my knowledge in just a few months. Isn't that exciting when that happens? I actually love when that happens. I don't know, like in terms of like actual specific advice, for handling the student becoming the teacher. I think that depending on those kinds of relationships, I think that that's very exciting. I think that when you get to that point and you start to know things, that's awesome. I think it can get really hard if they have other peers, or maybe, kind of relationships that get a little bit tricky. So in terms of that relationship, Kevin, maybe do you have like an example of an instance that you were looking for some advice on? All right, so no word from Kevin. Does anyone else have any questions about mentoring or anything related to it? Oh, that's a really good question. So John asked, any advice on how to get mentees to understand the value of mentoring? Sometimes I see things break down when the mentee doesn't seem to want to engage. I actually see that a lot with the code school that I mentor with. Uh, I'm actually currently as a part of a cohort, and there's 4 mentees in there, and there's 3 mentors. So they try to keep it pretty saturated so that there is almost a one-to-one mentor-mentee. And there are actually at least one of them, if not 2 of them, that are pretty checked out. And I think that's a really hard situation to deal with, especially if you really want them to succeed. You're trying, you want to help them, you're out there doing what you can to get them involved. And that relationship, they've actually been instructed by their code school that they need to be the initiators of any of the relationships. So that be any meetings that takes place, any conversations that take place, they're supposed to initiate them. But it's hard not to want to kind of get them involved. So I've done a handful of things in terms of like said, I'm going to be at this place at this time. Maybe I'm going to say, I'm going to be at Starbucks and I'm going to be working for 2 hours. If you need help with something, like I'll be there. So feel free to come. Otherwise, I've done things in terms of like inviting them to other events. So there might be some other tech events that have come up. There's a lot of really great tech events in Minneapolis, but there's one that's like tech, drink beers with tech. I actually don't like beer. So aside from all of my beer comments, I'm not a big beer person, but just things like that, like giving them all of the invites to the things that you feel like they may actually enjoy doing. And then I have gotten down to the point of sending them like just snippets of information. So I talked about sending out resources that you feel like might be valuable to them. So I'll start to collect those and I'll send them out like once a week or once every few days or once, a couple weeks, whatever that relationship looks like. And most of the time that there's usually one of those different like actions where they'll actually kind of take the hook. They'll say, okay, cool, I'm going to come to the happy hour, or you know what, thank you for sending me that article. That was actually really helpful. I've also been in situations where we're in a group like that, and because I've kind of ventured out into the tech scene here, I actually have a lot of relationships. So when it comes to new developers like actually wanting a job or talking about getting involved with something, I have a lot of relationships to kind of be able to hook those two together. So it's actually been very helpful for one mentee to end up telling another mentee like, oh, Tessa actually got me a connection at this agency or at this company. I think that there's only so much that you can do, but a lot of those tips that I mentioned, like being a good developer, just keep doing those things until a set amount of time goes by, whatever you're comfortable with, and they haven't responded. And then I think then it's time to walk away. But if you can continue to do those things, eventually they're gonna grab one of those hooks and run with them. Great. I hope they help, John. I hope that you get some actual involvement from that person.